Everybody, Lieutenant Joe Pangaro here for the Blue Heart webcast. So we like to stay topical when we can, and we talk about things that are going on. So we see that Bryan Kohberger is set to take a plea deal in the college murders in Idaho. Now, we've spoken about this before. I've given an update on it. Very, very interesting case to me as a criminal investigator, and should be for you too, I would think. So recently we did our criminal investigation course at the Ocean County Police Academy. We had officers from Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. It was excellent. We had a good time with it, but one of the things we talked about in there was understanding, who your killers are. What does your killer do? Does the crime scene tell you things? And it does. So very often we can see the way a criminal treated the victims can tell you about the mindset of the criminal, especially when it comes to homicide, sexual assaults, these kind of things. So when we look at the Idaho college murders, just for a refresh for those who haven't been keeping up on it, an individual went into a college out of dorm college housing at University of Idaho, where he went in and murdered 4 young people that were college students there. The police doing their investigation, they found a sheath underneath one of the victims, a sheath for a long bladed knife. On that sheath, they found some DNA, which led them to Bryan Kohberger, who they arrested. He was from Pennsylvania, but he went to school at a college next door to the University of Idaho. He was a criminal history major or something in doing a crime scene. He was learning about forensics and whatnot. Well, he was charged with the 4 first-degree murders. And when we look at the scene, and we've talked about this, he was not charged with sexual assault, even though 3 young ladies were brutally murdered in their bed, and one of them was in bed with her boyfriend. He was also brutally murdered, stabbed multiple times. We never heard about a charge of sexual assault, so we'd have to assume that he didn't sexually assault anybody. The DNA came from the sheath on the knife, from where I'm touching it. It could have been a cut, blood, skin, tissue, something could have been on there. So there was no sexual assault. And I found that strange. And what we talked about was the possibility that Kohberger is an incel, a member of the incel community, the involuntarily celibate community. These are self-identifying people who have a problem in life, in that they feel they are kept from having sexual relations with the people that they truly desire. For the guys, they really want the supermodels, the top 10% of women, the most gorgeous women, these unbelievable movie star types, and they can't get them, and they get very frustrated by that and angry, and then they strike out. And in many cases, we've seen that people in the incel community have committed murders by stabbing sprees, by shooting active shooter sprees, and even driving their cars over people. So when we saw in this Idaho murder case that these 3 young, very attractive women were murdered in their bed, and then the one boyfriend, they were stabbed to death repeatedly. And we've talked before about stabbing and what does that mean when there's repeated stabbing. So very often when there's repeated stabbing in an incident, it's usually relational in some way, boyfriend, girlfriend, 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 boyfriend, boyfriend, whatever. There's some kind of a relationship, and it gets to the point of violence, and then there's multiple stabbings. All right. In my book, The Investigation, the murder in that book, there was multiple stabbings with a long bladed knife. It's all related to the knife as a phallic symbol, control over this person. Sexual assault is not about sex, really. It's about power. So we see in the Kohberger case that there was a lot of those elements. And one of the projections that I made is that he may be an incel member. He may be someone who's unable to get the women he wants. So in the course of the case, we found out that he was known as a weird guy at the university he went, that he said strange things to women that were kind of bizarre, and that's the way he was viewed. And then we see the actual crime scene. We see these 4 young people stabbed repeatedly with a long bladed knife, but no sexual assault. So that tells me that this could be involving some type of an incel philosophy. We'll see. as time goes by. The update to the update to the update here is that apparently Kohberger has decided to accept a plea deal, to plead guilty to all 4 murders, first-degree murders, and he will take a sentence of 4 consecutive life terms without parole. He will give up all his opportunities for appeals, and he will just spend the rest of his life in prison until he dies in a cell and they have to cart him out. Now, the families are very upset by this because they wanted to get the facts of the case. And I think in most part, they wanted the death penalty. They wanted to exact revenge. This kid should pay with his life for what he did to their family members. Now, I know 2 of the family members have said that they would accept the guilty plea because, this turns into multiple years of their lives going to trials, having to show up every time this guy comes up with some appeal, some new idea that, oh, the DNA was mine, but it was transported there by Mr. Spock or some nonsense, and we have to go through all these appeal hearings and whatnot. So sometimes it's easier on the victims that the person takes a plea. They get a little bit better of a deal than if they went to trial, but it saves the family having to live with this every minute for the next 10, 20, 30 years of their lives or longer. So in this case, the families are very upset because they did want him to pay with his life, and I can understand it. But one of the things that we're going to see, and we should hear very, very soon, was part of the deal was he does not have to explain himself on the record, nor does he have to say what he did. He doesn't have to say where the murder weapon is. And I find all of that to be absolutely unacceptable. The family deserves that. Law enforcement, don't you want to know where that knife is? What did he do with it? Why did he attack these people? What drew him to them? As an investigator, that's what I want to know. Why did he target these young people? Why did he sneak into that off-campus housing and brutally stab them to death? He didn't steal anything. He didn't sexually assault anybody. And out the door he went. What was his motivation? Why do I want to know that? Because down the road, there'll be another crime committed by another murderer, and we can certainly learn things from every crime that we see and investigate. So we're going to hear very, very soon exactly whether or not the judge makes him give an explanation or whether he doesn't have to and he moves on. So we'll see very soon. But that's an update to the Idaho college murders. Always be curious, my friends. Learn, pay attention, and you never know when and where the next one's going to take place. It could be in your jurisdiction, and you could be the officer that's investigating it. This is Lieutenant Joe for the Blue Heart webcast saying, remember, Blue 360 Media, Riot Tint, and Medical Essential Diagnostics, and our newest sponsor, W Energy Drinks, right? They bring all of this to us. They're good friends of law enforcement, so take care of them. Be safe, be a part of the solution, not the problem.